Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity and creator of Bogash Life and Balance. And today we're going to talk about a really interesting concept that really falls back on everything I've been saying from the beginning about how much our overall health plays a role in COVID outcomes, and specifically death rates, because there's a pretty big disparity across the globe in death rates. As an example, in May of 2020, the UK had a 15% death rate. Now that's at the again in May, so early on, but that's the number of cases and the death rate. The US was at 6.2, Kenya was at 5.6, India 3.2, and South Korea was at the low end of 2.4. Now, fast forward to January, just 8 months later, those rates had dropped. The UK was down to 2.9, US was down to 1.7, 1.7 for Kenya, India 1.4, and South Korea at 1.5. So the first thing you notice is that these rates dropped dramatically over the course of 7 months. That's a lot of us having a better understanding of how to manage it. And, on the front end, everything was really kind of ugly. We were just doing what we did, or medicine was just doing what they normally do, and there's been a lot of education about. So the death rate naturally has plummeted. But then, so what ended up happening was this research group looked at factors that might have played a role in this variety across the globe, because UK at 15 and South Korea at 2.4, like there's a huge difference in mortality rates. So they started looking at a bunch of different factors, and what they found was that there were no single factors that explained the differences in mortality rates. A couple things that they did see was that the mortality rate generally was higher in richer than poorer countries. It should tell you something, very important factor. And so people say, oh, well, why is the U.S. such bad shape? Well, we're a richer country, and in general, the richer companies did not do as well as far as death rates go. However, when they looked at combination of factors, specifically 8 factors, and how these played a role, they put them into modeling, and these 8 factors matched very closely with the actual death rates, mortality rates in these countries. So what were these 8 factors? A lot of these should make sense. Alcohol consumption, diabetes levels, GDP per capita, so again, we're back to the richer countries, meat intake, milk intake, PM 2.5, so particulate matter. I've talked about how much dirty air made a difference in this. Population density played a role. So these are all changeable factors. These are nothing that we're talking about changing in a public health standpoint. Public health, we've all been talking about vaccination and masks, and not, you notice they're not on this list of factors that played a role in mortality rates. Interestingly enough, they also talked about the Global Health Index, which is basically a pandemic preparedness score. And I'm going to link to this in the description, because this is a very interesting factor to look at. And basically, based on quite a few different factors, how prepared are countries for a global health pandemic? Couple things. First of all, very little change from 2019. So apparently, all these factors that we know are important, we're not changing. And as a hint, things like masking and vaccination are not part of the Global Health Index. Now, you really have to look and spend some time looking through there. They become part of it, but they are a pretty small part of the overall preparedness. United States is number 1 on the list of countries that are basically prepared for that. Australia is number 2. UK, I think, was number 4, and the list goes down. So we're already prepared, as well as any other country across the globe. So where do we see these differences? It's these other factors that make a difference, enough to overcome the fact that we are better prepared for a pandemic. Now, people Like it's become incredibly political over the years, and yet if you look at objective markers for pandemic preparedness, the United States, according to the Global Health Index, is top of the list. And yet we've had pretty high mortality rates. We have to look at these other factors that are playing a role in that and admit that we need to make health changes. This is still, to date, 2.5 years later, not a part of the discussion. And anybody who's followed me knows that that is my ultimate frustration, is that we're not talking about overall health. And these are very specific factors that we could change today. We could have made massive changes in all of these factors in the past 2 years. Instead, the Global Health Index, the one that we're already doing... Now, keep in mind when I say we're doing well, all the countries are doing like pretty piss poor, but the United States is the best of the piss poor response. So, interesting. But I just thought this one was really cool in that these 8 metrics, when they used that to predict mortality, it matched very well mortality across the globe. And it should rethink where we're focusing our time, effort, and money on to have better outcomes from this pandemic and any future pandemic, which could be a lot worse. Something Ebola-like. That would, I'd still be in a cave if that was the case. So, as always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the description, as well as the information on the Global Health Index, because that's very interesting to look through. And make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.